Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo. With your host, Patrick Moran.
All right, what is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo sports talk and more. Today's episode is presented by Golf Dojo, your space, your time, your game. Bring your golf game to Golf Dojo, Western New York's best indoor golf experience. Visit mygolfdojo.com. My name is Patrick Moran. Big thank you, as always, to everybody out there for watching, for listening, for following, for subscribing. I do appreciate y'all very, very much. The pads went on today being Monday at Buffalo Bills training camp for the first time. I was actually in attendance. I was there in Rochester for the first time during training camp. Got plenty of thoughts, takeaways, observations based on camp that I want to share with you today. It won't be a particularly long episode. I do want to let you know, Wednesday night, if you haven't already heard about it, my guy from Locked On Bills, Joe Marino, is going to be with me live from Sunny Reds in Lackawanna. Joe's hooking up with me around 7 o'clock or so. We're going to catch up, shoot the breeze, have some wings, and then we are going to record an episode of Talking Buffalo probably right around 8 p.m. If you are in the area, stop on up, say hello. Joe is, no question, not just one of, if not the very best Buffalo Bills content creators out there today, but is without a shadow of a doubt, to use a rock term there, one of the most popular too. I know there's a lot of people out there who are big fans of Joe Marino. So if you want to catch up with him, meet him, say hello, get a selfie with him, whatever you want. Joe will be with me Wednesday night. Again, Sunny Reds in Lackawanna. That is going to be a really good time. One other little piece of business here before we get into training camp. I want to give a shout out to my man, Jay Skerski from the Buffalo News. Well, not really so much Jay Skerski, but his boy, Elliot, 10-year-old kid, man. And he is right now in North Carolina or South Carolina, along with 153 of the best 10-year-old golfers on this planet. He's competed in the Kids World Championship at Pinehurst. What an unbelievable experience for Elliot. Just 10 years old. This kid is unbelievable, man. He is the real deal. I know Jay is, besides being a great Buffalo Bills beat reporter, he's a very proud father, as he should be. Elliot, at just 10 years old, is just on levels that you rarely see with golfers at any age, let alone a 10-year-old. So best of luck to him. He's playing later this week. Don't know exactly. As we're recording this, the tee times haven't been set yet. But once they are and I find out, I'll let you guys know how Elliot did. But again, best of luck to him. Such a great kid, too. I've gotten to know him over the last couple of years. Great kid, extremely talented. And again, I know how proud Jay is. So if you're not seeing any Bills tweets this week from Jay Skerski on the Twitter X machine or anything in the Buffalo News, that's because he's with his boy down at Pinehurst playing against 153 of the best kids in the world. So best of luck to him. As for Bills training camp, again, on Monday, I'm recording this like kind of mid-afternoon Monday. I was in Rochester, got back. I'm trying to squeeze in an hour to record something for our Tuesday podcast before I have other things to do for the rest of the day. I would say this, and again, this was my first practice this session, or this season, I should say, that I was actually able to be in attendance. It's one thing to gather information from many of the very talented Bills beat reporters, content creators that have been in camp, kind of formulate some opinions, read some articles, see some podcasts, listen to some podcasts, et cetera, et cetera. But to be able to be there and see things with your own eyes is just, it's different and it's important. You know, I feel like at some point, if I want to have any kind of credibility when I'm trying to articulate to you my observations and my thoughts, well, I need to be there. Difference between this year and last year, quite frankly, especially for somebody, if you're not a media credentialed member, which I'm not, it's been really hard to get camp tickets. Last year, it felt like every day there was somebody on Twitter who was giving away their tickets, and it was an easy score. This year, it's been difficult. So Monday was the first day that I even had an opportunity to be able to get to camp and watch practice firsthand. I'd say this, the big news, so to speak, coming out of training camp on Monday wasn't anything to do with actual practice itself. Sean McDermott spoke to the media before practice, and it was revealed that likely, I don't want to say for sure, starting free safety, but likely starting free safety, new addition, Mike Edwards is going to be out, not even just day to day, but week to week with a hamstring injury. This ends a run where there were 3 practices where not really anything happened in terms of injuries, which of course is good, but the injury bug has finally started to bite the Buffalo Bills a little bit. So Mike Edwards is down with a hamstring injury. Clearly, when it comes to Mike Edwards to this point, things have not gone as hoped. Before this hamstring injury, Edwards missed a lot of offseason activities like OTAs, minicamp, and stuff with a shoulder injury, and now this. Now, I like Mike Edwards. I thought it was a good signing at the time. I still do. But, you'd be lying to yourself if you said these injuries that have been piling up on him aren't a concern. And especially for a new addition. If this was Teron Johnson, or if this was even Taylor Rapp, who was, he's been in the system now for a full year. He knows the system well. So I would be a little bit less concerned. But because Mike Edwards is new to this team, this organization, that concerns me a little bit more. Now, I know he's a veteran. I know Mike Edwards is a smart player, a gamer, plenty of experience, a winning pedigree, knows multiple systems pretty well, but still, you don't want to sign with a new team, go to a new system, and have to miss as much as he's missed. How long he's going to be out is going to matter. Sean McDermott said week to week. Hopefully that's 2 weeks. I mean, it certainly sounds like it's going to be multiple weeks. Hopefully that's 2 weeks. If he misses 2 weeks, that's fine. If it ends up being 3 weeks in the 4, you have to wonder if this is going to leak into the regular season, and if it's going to mean he just hasn't had enough time to practice with his teammates and get up to speed with everything, and maybe he doesn't end up being the starter this season. I saw a comment from my good buddy Aaron Quinn from over at Cover One when I put something out about Edwards being injured, because I said Demar Hamlin's in the mix now, and I mentioned a couple of other possible additions, which I'm going to get to here in just a second. But Aaron responded with saying, Terrell Bernard missed most of camp last year, and he was fine. Well, that's true. And that very well could be the case for Mike Edwards. I certainly hope it is. But Tyrell Bernard was not new to the system. Again, he knew the Bills system very well because he spent an entire season before last year in it. So I do think there's a difference between being new to the organization and somebody who's been around. And especially in a Sean McDermott defense, which probably hasn't changed all that much. So Tyrell Bernard, I'm sure, had a leg up on what his assignments were and everything he was supposed to do. Kind of my point. But again, we have to kind of see how things play out. Let's, for just the sake of discussion, because I think if it's just a week or 2 week injury or so, Mike Edwards ultimately probably ends up fine. Maybe he doesn't start week 1, but he'll be a starter sooner than later. But let's just, for the sake of discussion, speculation here, assume that this might be a more significant injury. Let's say it's going to be a 4 to 6 week bad hamstring strain. As I record this, we do not know the extent other than Sean McDermott saying it was week to week. Let's just assume, though, it's going to be a little more on the long-term side. What do the Bills do? Is it interior options, or do they look to the outside? Because if they do decide to, and they could make this happen if they really wanted to, they can find a way to make it work. Justin Simmons is still out there. I mean, this is a guy from the moment he was released by Denver, has been a favorite player for fans, for media, for content creators to talk about, and for good reason. He is one of the better safeties still in this league. And what I love most about Justin Simmons, and what I've always loved most about him, is he's played his best football against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, being in that division with the Denver Broncos. And, this is a team that seemingly, the Bills I'm talking about here, over the last few years, you're trying to sign players directly to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. You want to get over the hump, you got to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And, I mean, Justin Simmons is a guy who knows how to beat the Chiefs, a guy who's played well against the Chiefs. So and I got to emphasize this again, if this is a more on the serious side of kind of injury to Edwards, maybe, not likely, but maybe Justin Simmons is somebody that Brandon Beane and company ends up considering. Now, if they look to the outside, I will say this. The more likely scenario is going to be one that we've talked about, we've thought about for months, and that's pretty simple. Micah Hyde coming back. Micah Hyde has not retired. Micah Hyde has been on Eric Wood's podcast. We've heard from him before his charity softball game. Micah Hyde has said that he's not retired. He's staying in shape. See how things play out. He has stated that he would only come back to play for the Buffalo Bills. You got to assume he's in good shape, and maybe it's a little early in camp. He doesn't want to go through an entire training camp at this stage of his career. But I think that's significant. Again, this was a scenario where we said, well, what could bring Micah Hyde back to the Buffalo Bills? And it was pretty much injuries. Or if Mike Edwards was healthy, but just for whatever reason was a disaster. Or the guys behind him were a disaster. So I think Micah Hyde, certainly more realistic anyway than Justin Simmons. If this is a significant hamstring injury to Mike Edwards, I wouldn't be stunned now if Micah Hyde ends up getting a phone call. And it might not be today or tomorrow, because again, maybe he doesn't want to, and quite frankly, probably doesn't need to go through a full training camp. Maybe the Bills would sign him and he would come towards the tail end of training camp, maybe make a cameo or so during a preseason game or two, and bam, he's good to go. So I certainly think that is something that realistically, where Simmons maybe not so realistic, but I think that could be on the plate for the Buffalo Bills. But let's assume that either A, the injury is not all that serious and it ends up being a 2-week, maybe a 3-week injury, and the Bills want to stay in-house. They don't want Micah Hyde back for whatever reason, and they're not going to go sign somebody like a Justin Simmons. They're probably going to stay in-house. If so, man, oh man, this is a golden, and I mean golden opportunity for Demar Hamlin. This is an opportunity for Demar Hamlin to go from a great life story to a great on-field football story. And he's in the mix. He was in the mix before Mike Edwards hurt his hamstring. Demar Hamlin started day 1 of training camp. He started day 4 of camp. And depending on how you look at it today, he was with the ones as well. Cole Bishop was with the ones during some team stuff. And Demar Hamlin was with the team, with the ones at the beginning of full team drills, 11-on-11 stuff. He's very much in the mix. By all accounts, I didn't see really too much from him today, one way or the other. But by all accounts, he looks bigger. He's playing the part well. He's off to a pretty good start at training camp. And yeah, it would just be a great story for him to be a starter. Now, I'll say this. It would annoy me. I might have to mute the word Demar Hamlin on social media, because first time the guy makes a mistake, people are going to be on the Bills. He's only playing because he got hurt and he's a name and yada, yada. You know, all the bullshit that'll be coming if Demar Hamlin's a starter. I hope it doesn't bother you like it's probably going to bother me. But anyway, if they stay in-house, Demar Hamlin is certainly a candidate. And so is Cole Bishop. So is Cole Bishop. I think Cole Bishop, as evidenced today, Monday, in camp, he's very much in the mix. it's pretty apparent early on. Then when it comes to Cole Bishop, the Bills see him as a matchup piece and not necessarily a prototype positional player, so to speak. Like he's not like kind of like Poyer and Hyde were a little bit interchangeable. Cole Bishop is along those lines as well. Like he's not necessarily just a strong safety, not necessarily just a free safety. Like I thought going into camp that it was going to be Edwards versus nobody really. I thought Edwards was going to be the clear-cut starter. Not the case. It was turned into Edwards, Hamlin, and Bishop, where I thought Bishop was going to be more in line of challenging potentially Taylor Rapp. But that doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. So if Cole Bishop is in the mix for a starting job for sure, maybe even just playing time, I think it's going to be more at that free safety spot. Something to certainly keep our eyes on during camp. Again, you worry about it a little bit more because this is a position, the safety position, where pretty much since 2017, with the exception of the 1 year with the injuries to Jordan Poyer and to Micah Hyde, this was a George Foreman set it and forget it type of position. Like you didn't have to worry about that. You had a lot of other things to worry about with this football team, but safety was never one of them. But now, and especially with Edwards down, you have to wonder, is Demar Hamlin up to task to be a starter? Is Cole Bishop, as a rookie, ready to be a starter? Is Taylor Rapp starter material? Because he finished strong last year, but Taylor Rapp really, quite frankly, wasn't all that impressive in the reps that he got for the most part during the regular season last year. So do they stay in-house? Do they look to Micah Hyde? Or do they take a big swing and maybe try to land a Justin Simmons or somebody like that before the regular season? That remains to be seen. But anyway, again, after a handful of days with no real injury concerns, now we got one. Anyway, real quick break, come back. I want to talk about Greg Rousseau, who, man, he caught my eye and he is having a dominant Bills training camp so far. All right, we are back and we are talking about some training camp day 5 observations. This was my first training camp practice where I was actually in person at St. John's Fisher. By the way, great crowd too. Beautiful weather. Just an absolutely perfect morning for training camp. I can't compare to other teams because I've never been to another team's spring training camp, but I have a really hard time imagining there's many, if any, that are more well received by fans than the Buffalo Bills. It really, truly is a great experience. They put in work. The fans, it feels like there's not really a shitty seat in the house. Players are really cool with signing autographs and stuff like that after practice. But anyway, a lot of fun to actually be there in person. Hopefully I'll be there at least a handful more times. Anyway, all right, Greg Rousseau. This is who I wanted to talk about. This is the primary focus of today's episode. This dude looks really good. And I got to tell you, so over the weekend, I read Joe Biscaglia from The Athletic. I read his observations. Joe is absolutely one of those must follows, somebody whose work I read pretty much every single day. Anyway, during his camp observations through the first 3 days, he had his Bills camp MVP, and it was Greg Rousseau. And I was like, well, it's kind of odd. Josh Allen's slinging the ball. Keon Coleman's doing a lot of good things. Okay, Greg Rousseau. So that kind of, I didn't really tweet about that. I didn't really speak about that, but that certainly resonated with me and stuck in my head. So when I went to St. John's Fisher on Monday, he was one of a handful of guys that I really wanted to kind of lock in on. And holy shit, man, Joe was right. Because Greg Rousseau looked like a beast on Monday. He won, so they were doing one-on-one reps. And again, this is the first day that they had the pads on. And they're not even just one, there were like 2 or even 3 where straight up Groot kind of abused starting right tackle Spencer Brown. By the way, Spencer Brown had a day to forget, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think that's solely because of Greg Rousseau. That's just how good he was at practice on Monday. I mean, he won clean on some one-on-one reps. And then he looked really good in 11 on 11. He also beat Spencer Brown for what would have been a sack Look, this is the year. This is the year for Groot, man. This is year 4. This is the year where he needs to have his breakout season. This needs to be for the Buffalo Bills the year where Groot has his breakout season. To this point, I kind of feel like Gregory Rousseau has been a very high floor player. Like, he's been solid, and he's an all-around good edge defender. Like, he sets the edge so well. He's very good against the run, and he definitely brings at least some juice in the pass rushing game. No question about it. He's got the physicality. He's got the speed. He's got the size. He's got all those factors there. But to this point, I kind of feel like I said, a high floor player, but a little bit kind of like a limited low ceiling player. Like, I haven't seen much from Greg Rousseau through his first 3 seasons that suggests to me, hey, if this guy stays healthy, and he hasn't missed a lot of games, but Greg Rousseau has played through some pretty significant injuries, foot and ankle stuff, which, again, it hasn't kept him off the field, but it has certainly slowed him down some. But anyway, these first 3 seasons, I really didn't feel like I saw much in him that would make me say, you know what? If just a couple things fall in this guy's place, he's going to get 12 to 14 sacks. I haven't felt like that when it comes to Greg Rousseau. Based on what I saw today, based on what I've seen written and said about him through the first handful of days of camp before Monday here, that could be in play. That can be in play. And it needs to be. It really does, because I want to count on Von Miller to get you 8 to 10. I want to be able to count on Dwayne Smoot to get you 6 to 8. I want to be able to count on AJ Epinesa to get a minimum 6.5, 7 like he's had over the last 2 years, maybe a couple more. But I don't know that I can count on that. But I feel like you need to count on Greg Rousseau taking his game to another level. And by taking his game to another level, that means being as good as you've been against the run, being as good as you've been setting the edge, but finishing pass rushes, getting sacks, putting the quarterback to the ground. I think for the Bills defense to reach its potential this season, there's a couple players that really need to stand out. And without question to me, Greg Rousseau is one of them. And I don't know. Sometimes, especially if you don't have video clips, it's really hard to describe it in words. But Greg Rousseau, I think the best thing I could say for Monday, at least anyway, quite often in drills, team drills, individual, Greg Rousseau to me looked like a man amongst boys out there on Monday. It was really, really impressive. And after seeing him, I completely get now where Joe Biscaglia was coming from when he called him his MVP of Bills camp through the first few days. Anyway, something I was disappointed about, but completely understand. Matt Milano, Von Miller were 2 guys that I was kind of really looking forward to seeing how they were looking and how they were moving around with my own eyes in person, but they did not practice on Monday. No injuries, scheduled veteran rest days, maintenance for Vaughn, for Matt, and also for Teron Johnson. Teron Johnson on Monday as well. Again, as an observer, looking forward to seeing him. That might be a little bit disappointing, but I completely get it. You got to get these guys some rest. They got to ease back into being 100%. I talked to a couple people who've been at practice, including a media person, and it's pretty much been said, Matt Milano just seems to be getting a little bit better every day. Don't need to rush him. Sean McDermott said before training camp, I should say, that they were going to kind of ease Milano in a little bit, that he didn't have to necessarily be out there every day. So I'm fine with that. But just so you know, none of those guys practiced on Monday. One other player specifically that I wanted to hit on and talk about is a wide receiver who, God, man, I mean, wide receiver has been the main topic of discussion when it comes to the Buffalo Bills pretty much since free agency started. They let Gabe Davis go. They signed Curtis Samuel. At that time, you're like, all right, well, kind of replace one with the other, see what happens with the draft. But then they trade Stephon Diggs, and they end up drafting Keon Coleman in round 2, taking flyers on a couple veterans in May, And we've been talking about all that, like almost ad nauseum. Hell, we've even talked about fringe players a lot. Chase Claypool and KJ Hamler, Justin Shorter, a 5th-round pick from a year ago. We've talked about very, 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 very little, especially on this show at least. I'm not going to speak for other shows. Maybe you have talked him up a lot. Good on you if you have. Talk about Tyrell Shavers. I have barely even given this dude mention on this podcast, on my Facebook, on my Twitter X feed. Period. Just haven't. But this dude's making a lot of noise to this point in training camp. Let me read a direct quote from, I just talked about Joe Marino. I'm just going to be with me live Wednesday night, Sunny Reds. Let me read a direct quote from Joe Marino on Tyrell Shavers. This is what Joe said. Wide receiver Tyrell Shavers has made a lot of noise at this point in training camp, getting notable opportunity to work with the top 2 offensive units. And Sean McDermott just raved about his consistency, work ethic, and understanding of the offense during his presser. Brings a major special teams background from college, which Tyrell Shavers was undrafted last year out of San Diego State. He also played with Alabama, Mississippi State, spent all of last year on the practice squad. I remember seeing him at camp last year, and I didn't think much of him. I was like, all right, just another guy out there. No chance of making this team. He's got the size, 6'4", 210, which seems to be something that the Bills really like now. But he's a special team stud in college, and I never knew this, by the way. Blocked 3 punts with San Diego State. I tell you, that matters. Which, by the way, we're always also assuming, I'm certainly assuming, talking about all these Bills positional battles at wide receiver, we're assuming they're keeping 6. But last year, they only rostered 5. So who knows if they're even keeping 6. But let's just, for the sake of discussion, let's say that they keep 6. You could take pen, Sharpie, obviously, and you could write Samuel and Shakir, Keon Coleman, Mac Hollins. You could write them down in marker. There's your top 4. No question about it. 5, I thought for 5, it was going to be MVS for sure. So, by the way, you want an observation you want to take? From what I saw today, what I've seen or read about prior to today, I thought MVS was a lot. Not only did I think MVS was a lock to make this team, I said on yesterday's show, I'll call myself out. I've said a couple times leading into training camp, my bold prediction was MVS is going to have more receiving yards than Keon Coleman during Keon Coleman's rookie season. I'm here to tell you, after seeing practice in person today and kind of compiling a bunch of notes and talking to various media people who are covering the team every day, I am not 100% certain MVS is making this football team right now. I'm not. Because if he's not going to be a top 4 guy, like if he's not looking better than Keon Coleman, if he's not going to get reps with the ones, MVS has 0 special teams value, and that matters. And special teams is going to mean even more now with the new kickoff rule. So if those are your top 4, and by the way, Matt Collins, an excellent special teams player. But special teams is going to play a role on 5 for sure, 6 for sure if they keep 6. And even if they were to keep 7, I feel like it's going to matter. So if MVS is not getting out there and getting reps with Josh Allen and not making any plays in camp, unless the Bills' strategy for whatever reason, and I wouldn't put it past Sean McDermott, he's all about competitive advantages. Maybe they're kind of sleeping on purpose on MVS and waiting for the regular season so they can just have him run deep all the time. And they're not giving any of those looks to 31 other teams, or surely keeping an eye on what the Bills are doing at training camp. So maybe they're intentionally sleeping on MVS. But if that's not the case, MVS has had a very quiet training camp. He's had a very quiet Monday at camp when I saw it with my own eyes. And I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like, I don't know if this dude's making the team. I never thought Chase Claypool was going to make this 53-man roster. And by the way, he's day-to-day with a toe injury right now as well. I thought it was going to be the first 4, MVS 5, and then maybe Shorter at 6 or Hamler at 6. And I think Shorter and Hamler are in the mix. But my whole point was this. With the reps that Shavers is getting with the opportunities that he's taken advantage of. He had a nice catch today at practice, knowing how good he is on special teams. I think it's time to put Tyrell Shavers literally right there with Shorter and with Hamler for one spot for sure, maybe two spots. So anyway, I would say through 5 days, and especially on Monday, from what I've seen that I could attest to, that probably the biggest surprise that at least I didn't see coming prior to the start of camp would be the emergence of Tyrell Shavers as somebody who can make this roster in a very, I'm certainly not going to say prolific wide receiver room, but very crowded wide receiver room. Shavers is very much in the mix. A couple other quick things before I get out of here. Kyrie Elam, pretty impressed with him. Makes me think back to last year, though. I had to be careful. It's kind of like, I'm going to use this example. My son. And you're like, what the hell are you talking about, dude? You're comparing your son. Talk about Bill's training camp here. My son, no matter how many good things he does, I almost hate to give him a compliment too much, because it seems like every time I give my kid a compliment, he almost immediately goes and does something pretty stupid. That's what I mean by that. Kyrie Elam last year, I remember some training camp practices. I'm like, yo, this dude's the real deal. He looks like a first-round pick. I think you're going to see big things from Kyrie Elam. Then I'd watch him the very next day of practice. I'd be like, this guy can't get an assignment right. He's holding a receiver every other play. Sean McDermott is screaming at him. And what the hell is going on with this guy? He looks lost. Well, Monday at practice, Kyrie Elam looked like the former. He looked good. I thought he did. He had an interception during one-on-one drills. I think he was covering Justin Short. It kind of ripped the ball right from him. From what I saw, at least with my eyes, I thought Kyrie Elam had a very solid Monday. Got in a little bit of a skirmish at practice with Matt Collins, although that was more Matt Collins kind of threw the ball at him. I think he did that on purpose, try to get a reaction, get things going a little stirred up. But anyway, based on what I saw on Monday, I feel like Kyrie Elam is solidifying his role in that outside 3 CB. Like, he's that third corner, outside corner after Rasul, after Christian Benford. At least so far, I don't want to jump the gun and say this guy is putting himself in position to challenge Benford to start, because I don't believe that to be the case. I think Christian Benford is very solid and set in stone that he's going to be the starter. But I've talked about it going into to camp, that Kyrie Elam was going to be one of the key players to keep an eye on, because if he looks good and Sean McDermott can trust him, he's basically going to be your Dane Jackson this year, which at this point, forget about him being a first-round pick. That don't mean shit anymore. First-round pick means something on draft night. At this point, 3 years later, who cares? You're looking at your roster. And if he could be a quality Dane Jackson type player, I'm good with that. So that's if he looks good. If he looks bad, Brandon Beane's going to have to look to the waiver wire or the trade market to get another corner. And from what I saw today and from what I'm hearing about Kyrie Elam over the first handful of days, he's looking like a guy that you can count on to be that third receiver. A couple other noticeable takeaways here as before I get out of here. Curtis Samuel. I know he's been talked about a lot. There's just a smoothness I like. This is the first time I've seen him in person. Like, gun to my head, I think I might pick him, and I might change my answer tomorrow. But today, if you put a gun to my head, I would pick Samuel to lead the Bills in receiving yards right now. There's just he's got the speed. We all know that. He's got good hands, but it looks easy too. And there's a smoothness to him that I really liked. He impressed me today in person. Another injury, Ty Johnson had some contact, I believe it was with Terrell Bernard. He left. He got helped off the field by trainers. You never like to see that. Looks like it potentially could be a hamstring injury. That is going to elevate Ray Davis, give him more looks, more touches, which I'm fine with. I'm wondering if Ty Johnson's injury is going to be more on the serious side, if it's week to week, something like that. I wonder if the Bills may look outside the organization at a veteran. Do they elevate? Is Frank Gore Jr. going to get more of a look? Is Evans, who's already on the team, is it going to benefit him? Is he going to get more of a look? It'll be interesting to see what they do if Ty Johnson's injury turns out to be serious. But like I said, it's if you want to have a silver lining in it, I think it's going to give Ray Davis more looks, and that's a good thing. Also, it's just one snap, but saw a fumbled snap between Conor McGovern and Josh Allen. It looked like a bad snap from Conor. That's something to monitor. Apparently, that's already happened a handful of times during camp. Conor McGovern is tasked, with replacing Mitch Morse. And, maybe to be expected. It's early in camp. So my worry meter is not too high right now. But, Conor McGovern has not played a lot of center in the NFL, at least anyway. And certainly something to monitor. You would hate to see that become an issue during the regular season. If it were, I don't know if the rookie Van Pan Granger, the fifth rounder, if he'd be ready to play center. Alec Anderson, we'd have to see. But hopefully things will get better with just some reps and some practice with McGovern. But I had to point that out. A little bit interesting there. Kingsley Jonathan, I've liked him now since he's been a Buffalo Bill. And he made a couple nice plays at practice. I feel like he's in clear position to make this team. I think the Bills are going to keep 6 ends. The top 4. I think Javon Sullivan, a 5th rounder, by the way, really fast. But you can tell the physicality, he's not there at the NFL level. Not surprising at all. This is what I expected from him. I think Javon Sullivan is purely going to be, if he plays at all early on, he's going to be a pure pass rush specialist. He's not a well-rounded defensive end that you can have out there. I think teams will see him out there and he'll just run the football down his throat. So I don't think he's ready for a regular rotation spot. That said, 5th round pick and investment in him, he's making this team. He's your 5th defensive end. Assuming he keeps 6, and I do think they will keep 6, it's Kingsley Jonathan versus Casey Toohill in all likeliness. Really didn't see anything from Casey Toohill. Really haven't seen or heard anything about him at all, pretty much, since he signed, quite frankly. Minicamp, training camp, et cetera, et cetera. I liked what I saw from Kingsley Jonathan. I think he's in a really good position to make this football team. Keon Coleman had a nice play, really nice catch, kind of double clutched it, but he got his feet in bounds and he ended up catching the ball. Other than that, relatively quiet Monday for Keon, but man, you could just you could see it, man. You could feel the chemistry between Josh Allen and Keon Coleman. He and Josh, certainly it looks like to me, you could kind of feel like they got that going early on. I kind of feel like this kid is going to be a game or two. Like he's going to be one of those guys where maybe doesn't impress you all that much at practice. Not because he's not working hard. And hell, he's actually had a couple impressive practices. So what the hell am I even talking about? But I feel like when the game's on, the lights are the brightest. Like that's when he's gonna be at his best. Then I don't really necessarily see any of that specifically today on Monday to make me feel that. Just a hunch. But it's a hunch that's been growing on me, and I'm sure a lot of you as well. He's kind of got that star factor to him. And it's kind of weird how, in hindsight now, how much I did, probably you did too, a lot of us certainly did, slept on him when it came to the draft. And I think that's just because we were just so locked on either making a huge move for the top 3 guys because Stephon Diggs got traded, or the Brian Thomas trade up, or just straight up speed with Xavier Legette, or especially Worthy. But Keon Coleman looks like a really good fit for the Bills right now. Last thing, save the best, I guess, here, I suppose, for last. But Josh Allen just looks really dialed in. I'm not saying something that you don't already know. Maybe outwardly there's nothing different about Josh Allen, but I really feel like this is the guy who's got something to prove this year. How much does he really need to prove? I guess that's debatable, but I know there's a lot of people out there who, obviously think that Stephon Diggs is the one who made Josh Allen. There's a lot of people out there who will criticize Josh, saying he can't win big games. He hasn't been to a Super Bowl. He's only been to one conference championship. And the winning part is true. He knows he's got to win. That's kind of my point. He knows he has to get to a Super Bowl if he wants to be, considered among the all-time greats. He knows he needs to get to a Super Bowl if you want to legitimately put him in that same breath, that same conversation as Patrick Mahomes. I think he gets that. And Again, nothing outwardly that I saw on Monday, but you could just tell. I know I had a whole discussion yesterday, and Tim Graham had a big article about it. Josh Allen being a little bit more of a vocal leader. I don't know if he's going to change in that regard, but I think you're going to see a hunger and an urgency to his game this year. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch. A lot of fun to watch. Aura of uncertainty. That's kind of like my takeaway, not really necessarily just from practice on Monday, but kind of my takeaway of this team right now as things stand. There's an aura of uncertainty about it. Again, not just based on today, my overall sentiments. Don't know what we're getting with this team right now. Like this offense could end up really struggling without Stephon Diggs or Gabe Davis, without Mitch Morse. They could struggle not having that number one receiver, that center, that dependable, trusty center. That could happen. Or they could really flourish. They really can flourish. This offense is well-rounded, is balanced. It's death by 1,000 cuts. It's, to use their mantra, it's everyone eats. Defensively, they lost a lot of names. But if they're healthy, I think this defense could be better than it's been over the last few years. Maybe even significantly better. You got Terrell Bernard coming into his own. You got Christian Benford coming into his own. You got a healthy Matt Milano back. You're younger at safety. Greg Rousseau, we just talked about him. This could be the year he puts it all together. Ed Oliver didn't really do much on Monday, but he's had a really good training camp. And he's a good player. Jaquan Jones, if he can keep it together, stay healthy. A lot of talent on this defense, man. A lot. Teron Johnson, literally an all-pro slot corner. So there's a lot of talent on this defense. They could be better. So this feels to me like a team, they could be in transition. Or this could be a team that could run roughshod over the league with a more unpredictable type of offense. Led by a guy, like I said, who's on a mission to just slay this league and put himself right back into that Pat Mahomes being the GOAT type conversation, which he knows he's got to win a Super Bowl to do that. Going to be fun, man. Certainly going to be fun. Pretty interesting practice. Again, nothing crazy to see on Monday. The Ty Johnson injury sucks. The Mike Edwards injury news sucked. Greg Rousseau looked great. At Spencer Brown's expense, purely almost. At Spencer Brown's expense. I thought Kyrie Elam looked good. Josh Allen doing his thing out there. All in all, good practice. The Bills practice Tuesday and Thursday in Rochester. Friday, scrimmage game at Highmark Stadium. And again, one more time, Joe Marino's going to be with me live, Sunny Reds, Wednesday night. The Bills practice on Tuesday. We'll talk about it a little bit for Wednesday's show, but I'll really dive in with Joe on Wednesday. He's been at Bills camp since the weekend, and he'll be there this entire week. So I'm sure I'll be able to pick his brain and get lots of insight from Joe then. But anyway, it's going to do it for today. Big thank you again, watching, listening to the show. Really appreciate you very much. The Pod Bag, the episode where you control the narrative, your questions, your comments, your takes, coming up on the show tomorrow.